This book has completely changed my life. Before I even got done reading it, I was about halfway through this book when I decided I need to start a business. And not even a few days later after starting that business, I made my first $250 from my first customer. Like within 2 days of starting the business. Had I not had read this book, I would have lacked a bunch of self-confidence in starting a business, and I also would have went about starting a business entirely the wrong way, as I have done many times in the past with all of my failed businesses. This book was written by a man called M.J. DeMarco. This little handsome fellow right there, you can see him right there, that little guy, yep. He wrote this book. So he was a self-made millionaire who basically started a limousine, not a limousine company, but he started a limousine website. So it was basically like a booking website, but for limousines. And so he started that and he sold that company for millions. That's who he is. So what is this book really about, and why is it different from every other business and entrepreneurship book out there? So the main theme of this book is to break the conventional way that most people have learned of how to get wealthy and how to build wealth, such as climbing the corporate ladder or spending 10 years in school. That way you can raise your value only to rack up tons and tons of student debt and then have to be stuck in that job to pay off the debt and then take your earnings to invest in the stock market. And then by the time you're age 60, maybe, if everything went okay, you have millions of dollars. The point of this book is to get rich fast and not at the age of 60. Now, when I say fast, the book explains that it doesn't mean that you're gonna, it's not like here's how to get rich overnight. It's not one of those books that's gonna promise you like all these other things you see that, so here's how to get rich in a few days. But fast could mean basically under 10 years, which is pretty fast considering that most people work their entire life, and even when they retire, they're still not a millionaire. But how does one get rich fast? MJ talks about people falling into two buckets. So either you're going to get famous, such as being a rapper, an actor, or a sports player, or you start a business. That's basically the only two ways you can get rich fast. Now, he said for most people, they're gonna be under the start a business bucket. But here's the thing. We've all heard start a business, right? Start a business. But you have to start the right business. That's the key. The right business, and you need to have the right structure of your business. So in this book, he gives 5 commandments, the FASTLANE commandments, if you can call them, which is C.E.N.T.S. C.E.N.T.S. Sense. The business has to make sense. It has to make sense, and it has to make sense. Okay, so what does this mean? C.E.N.T. stands for control, entry, need, time, and scale. The business has to follow all of these, otherwise it's probably the wrong business. And that's a mistake that I had made with a lot of my businesses before. I won't get too much into that, but I will go over what this means. So control means you need to have full control of your business. You cannot be in the passenger seat. You have to be in the driver's seat. If you are investing in somebody else's business, right? So somebody says, oh, I want to start, doing real estate. And they ask you like, oh, you want to go in with me? And you put in $10,000. That is not, technically you could say you're in a business, but it is not your business. You don't have full control. If you don't have full control, like what he said in the book, the car, the ship, the train, whatever you want to call it, it could wreck at any moment because you're not in the driver's seat. You don't have control. That's number one. In order to be a really good business, you have to have full control of it. Now, entry, E stands for entry. And what that means is that if it's an easy entry that anybody can get in like a day or a month, it's probably not a good business to start. And the reason is because if it's that easy to get into, everybody's probably doing it, and the competition is going to be very, very high. The barrier to entry, if it's too low, there'll be too many people that's in that space that's already way ahead of you, and it will be hard unless you can find some opportunity or some problem or something that you can do about that that's better. But if you can't, and you're just doing basically what everybody else is doing, and you're starting late, it's probably not going to work out. So that's what the E, the entry, stands for. Now, need. This is probably the most important commandment of all of them. Need means it has to be something that people actually need. Okay, it can't be something that you're starting because, oh, you like this. It has to be something that people really need. Now, time means the business has to be separated from your time. So a lot of people start a business thinking they're a business when they're their own boss, right? When they've started something or they sold something. So I'll give you an example. If you started a food truck, right? You could say, oh, I started my own business. This is great. Now I'm my own boss. But with a food truck, you've really just replaced your job with now another job, basically, because you have to be there. And even if you don't have to be there, you have to hire employees. And so if you have to hire employees, it's still not really like separated from your time. You have to manage it. And this also goes into the last one, which is scale. S stands for scale. And what that means is that the business has to be scalable. And again, with the food truck, it's not really scalable because you're limited by basically the local area that you can serve. And even if you served like everybody in your local area, you're still limited by the amount of like food and resources you have in that truck. And even if it was unlimited, you're still limited by the amount of hours your employees can work or are at least willing to work. And even then, you're still limited to one food truck. In order to scale, it's going to take a lot of risk, and it's just going to be very difficult to scale a physical business, which is why MJ always talks about the best thing to do is to go online, because scale is unlimited there. You can serve the world online, whereas with the food truck or like a hair salon, you're only serving locally unless you franchise, which is very difficult and very risky to do. So he always talks about going online as the best way. If you can find a way to serve people virtually, that is the best business you can start, because you can scale, you can separate your time, and you can have full control over it. Whereas like if you start a physical business, the city could change some permits or something like that. Anything could happen where like they may make your food truck move or your hair salon or whatever. They could change zoning laws. A lot of things could happen in a physical business. I don't recommend physical business. For some people, if that's your area of expertise, if you have been a plumber for 25 years or whatever, then it's not a bad idea. It's still better, in my opinion, than working for somebody else. But if you want to make millions, what MJ says is that online is the best way to go. And that's how this book honestly changed my life before I even got halfway through it, is because I was in the process of starting a cleaning business, because I have Airbnbs. And one issue we ran into with our Airbnbs was that it was very, very difficult to find a reliable cleaner. So we had basically sent out a job post, and we had hundreds of cleaners apply. And I thought, wait a minute, how about I just take them all on? And then if I don't have enough rooms to basically make them go full time, how about I just hire them out to other people, maybe for a little bit higher, pay them a little bit less. And if you think that's bad, like basically that's how all jobs work, right? If you're working a job, that's exactly what your employer's doing. So don't think that's like exploitation. Well, it is exploitation, but it's the way the world works, okay? Anyway, so that was my idea. And then I realized like that's going to be very difficult to scale. And not only was it difficult to scale, it was just this horrible business, because when you deal with people, like they're just unreliable, they're unpredictable. We had people like who just wouldn't show up. And then you have to think, well, what about if a cleaner like left something there? What if they burned a house down? There's so much risk, right? There's so much risk. And just the risk to reward ratio is very, very little. It's hard to manage people. It's very difficult. So this just goes back to the point that MJ was saying, is start an online business, something that you can do online, okay? And another thing I want to point out about this book that he mentions is don't go after what you love. Okay, now that doesn't mean like never go after what you love, but what he was saying is that somebody loved comic books, and so they opened a comic book store in a town that was like full of old people, and like nobody cared about it. The store closed down a little bit later, and it was because the owner there said, oh, let me do what I love. This is what I love, so I'm going to open a shop about it, and everything's going to work out because it's what I love to do. Rather than looking at the market and looking at what people actually need, and will this actually serve this community or wherever you're putting your storefront? Will it actually be beneficial to the people there, or is it kind of selfish and only beneficial to you? And so he says, replace love with passion. And what he means by that, I like to change the word to replace love with a why. He basically means you need a strong why. Okay, not do what you love, but do it for your why. So is your why because you want to travel wherever you want, whenever you want? Is it because you want to have more free time? Is it because you want to retire your parents? Is it because you want your kids to be taken care of? Is it because you don't want a boss telling you what you can do and when you can do it and when you can't do it and when you have to be at work and what time you can go home? That's a pretty strong why. So you need a strong why in order to push you forward, especially in those hard times, because business is up and down and up and down. There will be very difficult times in starting a business, but you need that strong why pushing you forward, not about doing what you love, okay? And that also goes back to the need. He always mentions, don't chase money when you're starting a business. Chase problems to solve. Just look at problems around you. And that brings me to another point this book really brings out that I absolutely love, is to not think so big. Don't try and start the next Amazon or the next Apple, the next Shopify, the next Airbnb, the next Uber. Don't think like that, especially if you're one person. Like, it's not going to work out. If you don't have investors, if you don't have a lot of capital, don't even think about that. What he says is basically look at something people are already doing and find one simple thing you can improve on. one thing that they're doing, that you can look at the reviews and see what are their customers complaining about. You can start the same thing and improve on that one thing. And that is all you need to have a successful business. Do something differently, right? And don't worry about so much about saturation, okay? Because Starbucks was not the very first coffee shop, but that didn't start the owner of Starbucks from starting it and taking it and making it different, making basically a community, right? He made a brand. And that's another thing he mentions in this book. Do not start a business, start a brand, because people will always remember the brand, right? Not many people remember the business, but they do remember the brand, and brands thrive, businesses survive. That's a quote from him. All right, I didn't just make that up. That's something I also read in the book. This book is full of so much information. Like most books that I read, I get something that like really sticks with me and that's just super valuable after like every maybe 5 pages, 10 pages. This book is like literally every single page is just filled with wisdom. I mean, every single page. It is, I love this book. Like I can't thank him enough for writing it. And I'm sure a lot of other people out there who've read this feel the same. I can't mention everything in this book because this book is like almost 400 pages, I think. 300, a little bit over 300 pages. And like I said, every page is just filled with wisdom. But that is the basis of this book, is that if you want to become a millionaire fast, you have to start a business, and it has to be the right business. Now, when I had talked about giving me self-confidence before, it's not that I didn't have confidence in myself before the book, but the book gave me a new perspective, something that I mentioned in the very beginning, to be successful in business, and that is belief. Because your belief controls your actions, and your actions control your life. So one point that I mentioned out that I will forever remember was a point of like, if you believe in Santa Claus, what do? You put cookies and milk by the chimney. Why? Because you believe in Santa Claus, right? So your belief literally controls your actions. Whatever you believe in will control what you do. If you do start a business because you believe you can do it, if you don't, it'll be because you believe it's not for you, right? So change your belief first. That is where you start. And that is something in this book that that's the one thing that I will take from this book that I'll never forget. There's so much information in this book that I'll probably forget a lot of it, but that is one that I will never forget. Change your belief and you will change your life. Now in the book, he acknowledges that this will probably take a long time. It's not something that happens overnight, which is also another point he mentions out a lot. Millionaires are made by processes and not events. If you see something that looks like an event, it won't make you rich. If you see some ad that says, hey, if you follow this step and my guide, and then 6 months you'll be rich, that's an event, and it most likely 100% won't make you rich. And so that's another point. He says, look 3 feet in front of you and not 3 miles. Because if you look at the mountain, you will be overwhelmed and you won't know what to do. Look right in front of you. It's kind of like driving a car, right? You can only see like what's right in front of you if you're driving at night. And if you try to look like really far in the distance, you're gonna lose sight of what's right in front of you and you're gonna crash. So it just makes sense to focus on what's right in front of you. Just like if you're in a marathon, you can only run 1 step at a time, right? You can't run 2 miles at a time. So if you can only take 1 step at a time, it doesn't make sense to try to look ahead and try to leap forward. You're just gonna exhaust yourself and burn yourself out doing that, all right? And so with that said, I wanna leave you guys with a quote from this book. This is on page 196 if you guys ever get this book. So at the bottom it says, the brick walls are there for a reason. The brick walls are not there to keep us out. The brick walls are there to give us a chance to show us how badly we want something. The brick walls are there to stop people who don't want it badly enough. They are there to stop the other people.